Okay, selamat sore. Good afternoon. We are going to start what I believe is quite important event on the eve of the Indonesian election tomorrow, which promise to be for better or for worse. Sciortino. I am Leah Sciortino. I am the director and founder of Junction, and Junction is this venue here based at the Bangkok Arts and Cultural Center in Bangkok. I have my life, professional and personal, has been very much tied to Indonesia. So of course, I care a lot about what is happening in the country, but also because what is happening there will influence the entire region, although it's not received the due attention in international media. I think now there will be more and more attention for what is happening, and we hope this event will contribute to that. So we have a very good panel today, starting with who is from the New York Times, and he has been in Indonesia. He has worked in Indonesia, but also with long time experience in Southeast Asia. Then we have Kharisma Nugroho, who is a researcher, and yes, again, a very long pedigree of working for development organizations, well as interested in analysis of survey and data. And then we have Galuh Wandita, unfortunately online, but she is well known for her human rights work in Indonesia and Timor-Leste, even before it became Timor-Leste. So without further ado, I will start immediately with Patrick, then with Kharisma. Finally, we will Galuh.
Can you hear me through this? Okay. I will just begin talking because there's no obvious question posed. So what do we expect tomorrow? We expect the world's largest direct presidential election to take place. The public will be highly engaged in this if the past elections are an indication, perhaps as much as an 80% turnout. Indonesia holds elections like nobody else. It's a one-day election across thousands of islands involving millions of poll workers. It's really a big undertaking and has to some extent a celebratory aspect. But 3 candidates are running, as you probably know. All of them have ties to the existing government of President Jokowi. These are not challengers from the outside, even though they might cast themselves that way. We were just discussing that they all have their connections. But the front runner is the former general, former son-in-law of the dictator Suharto, by the name of Prabowo Subianto. And he has a disturbing record of human rights abuses. I see it often reported that he is accused of human rights abuses, but actually he was discharged from the army by a group of generals, a panel of generals who found that he had violated the rights and abused a number of protesters by arresting, imprisoning them, and having them tortured. This aspect of his background and his character has been perhaps not exploited as much by his opponents as it could be, and he seems to be managing to rise above this in his campaign that casts him as now a cuddly 72-year-old grandfather who dances in TikTok videos. His campaign, most importantly, has involved the president's eldest son, Gibran, through a very questionable maneuver. Maybe you're all familiar with this. The Constitution allows vice presidential candidates to run by the age of 40. Gibran is 36. So he, in order to join Prabowo's ticket as his running mate for vice president, there needed to be a ruling by the Constitutional Court to allow to create an exception. And this court, just by coincidence, or actually not coincidence, was headed by a Chief Justice who is President Jokowi's brother-in-law, in fact, the uncle of Gibran, and he led a 5-4 ruling that created an exception. He was subsequently kicked off the court for his ethical, I'm sorry, removed as Chief Justice. He remains on the court for his ethical violation. But the ruling stood and Gibran has joined the ticket. And since Gibran joined the ticket, Prabowo's standing has risen steadily in the polls. You can't believe all polls, obviously, but the trend line shows Prabowo gaining bit by bit over the last 8 weeks and now could very well win in the first round. So why don't I leave it there and pass it over to you?
Yeah, thank you. For me as a researchers, the question is, first is how dangerous is the candidates, especially the front runner, right? So, and it's very clear that we can see the evidence, how dangerous is this front runner, abuse of power, etc. So I don't disagree with this evidence, but my discipline told me that we need to know what is not seen, right? Researchers or any discipline is trying to understand what is behind the curtain, right? Because if we see that how this is doing bad and easy, and then especially in the algorithm of our social media, when we have a certain preference, all the evidence that support our preference will expose to us, right? And then it build our confidence that yes, he is very evil and he is very good, this candidate is great, right? So then what happened now in the discourse in Indonesian, according to me, myself, my groups, there is like a disproportionate access to information. So I will start with this statement as a researcher. Sometimes what we consider evidence that support my argument, sometimes it's just an algorithm of a certain system of information that favored my ears. So to answer the questions like who's more dangerous to Indonesian democracy, right? Very easy. Yes, Prabowo, right? We can see all the track record and everything. The question is, do we invest adequate and fair resources to understand the dangers of the other candidates? And then we understand that this question is, oh yeah, of course, the incumbent has more resources, so the information is much more controlled by their groups. But I think it's not that easy. So if the questions to me is like who is more dangerous to democracy in Indonesia, and then if some candidates wins, whether it will create significant change to Indonesia, my question is that the history in Indonesia shows that dramatic changes because of change in leadership is not so dramatic. We know from Suharto, even from Suharto during the Reformation, that we had riots, we have very bad transitions. Can we see what is really substantively changed in Indonesia? Yes, we see the form, right? We have constitutional court, the police separated from the military, all the procedural democracy changed. But what is the substantive democracy? Is it changed? Anies, when he won the governor in Jakarta, he said, I will do reform. I will against reclamations of Jakarta coast. Does it happen? No, right? Reclamation go on, and what is Anies changed? No. So I believe, not conspiracy theory, deep state, but the power of a new order that demonstrated into business oligarch, we cannot ignore this. So Bu Lia share me information like who's behind Anies, who's behind also Ganjar. They are all incumbent. so who will tomorrow we will know the quick count. I don't expect like a dramatic change in the rules of the games. Some people still in the power and the control of the thing. So of course there are some space for changes. We can see during the Jokowi focus on the infrastructure. We know some of loopholes in the infrastructure, but we have to acknowledge there are some changes also. The expenses is also quite high on environment, etc. But yes, there are some space of hill, but in terms of percentage, you can expect the changes of the leadership, maybe 30% changes. The 70% doing business as usual. You can see also from the economic growth. Changing regime, Indonesia 5-6% economic growth. Why? Because our economic structure is also controlled by this. So to conclude my sessions, first, Prabowo is very evident that and Jokowi, of course, behind him, is very dangerous for democracy and the abuse. Especially procedural democracy, as you mentioned, right? Constitutional court. But how about Anies? Anies' track record when he won the governorship and then during his time as a governor, how he provides space and budget for fundamentalisms to grow, it's also dangerous to democracy. And then, to me, Anies' a threat to democracy is much more on the identity. The last thing is about Ganjar and Mahfud. Sometimes a threat to democracy if you do not take action. So Ganjar and Mahfud also has a risk of erosion of democracy by not taking action. So first, I'm quite pessimistic that these three will establish democracy. I still believe that democracy should be strengthened by non-government. But whether this candidate who will elected will make a change in Indonesia, 30%. Don't expect dramatic change. Thank you.
I think this is quite controversial statement. Many are feeling the change that will be brought if indeed Prabowo and Gibran, for the way they have been chosen and already the many abuses that have been done, that the risk will be quite significant, more than the other two candidates, although the other two candidates also have certain risk. But let's see what Galuh can tell us. Please, Galuh.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone there. Apologies that I can't be there myself. So I actually have a PowerPoint, but it's all pictures. Don't worry, it's not gonna be an academic lecture, but it just will help us because I'm over here. So, Bom, are you going to try to put it on, or is it me? Thank you. So, all right. Can you put it on slideshow? Thank you. So I wish I could say that we're at crossroads, but I feel like we're on the brink of something untoward. But the thing is, Indonesia is not alone. People like Maria Ressa, who's a very prominent journalist, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, has talked about how the internet has really corrupted our information system. And she says, without facts, you can't have the truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these, we have no shared space, and democracy is a dream. So she's last month or a few months ago talked about how all these other countries also are facing elections, and because of our very corrupted information system, she says we're in the last 2 minutes of democracy. So sadly, this is something that's happening across the world. Okay, next slide. But I think for Indonesia, really, we have ignored our very difficult past. And because of that, impunity is impunity for serious human rights violations is Indonesia's most critical challenge. It's really a roadblock against building a resilient democracy. And, you know, funnily, I work on these human rights violations from a long time now, almost 3 decades. And people say to me, why are you working on this old stuff? You know, there's plenty of new stuff, but the old stuff, you know, they reach a threshold that is what we call atrocity crimes. So crimes against humanity that were committed in 1965, where more than 1 million people were killed, and the same number of people were put in prison at the beginning of the Suharto regime. The end of the Suharto regime, where a lot of people are now focusing on 1998, where Prabowo played a very important role, trying to save the regime, trying to push for a coup, possibly, and very much involved in the abduction of students who were protesting in 1998. And then also in East Timor, we cannot forget that between 1975 to 1999, there were major atrocities committed there. And Prabowo was active in East Timor since 1976. He came in as kind of the special forces son-in-law favorite child, and stopped a peace agreement process in 1983. People say he was very much involved in a massacre in a village called Kararas. And he was very much involved in the taking of children. Thousands of Timorese children were taken during the period of the Indonesian occupation. And my organization and I, we've now found 180 of them, and we've been able to reunite about 50% of them. They're all adults now, and both sides, you know, traumatized by this long process of forced separation. So, you know, we cannot forget that he also, during that time, sort of introduced this process where he was able to bring, to groom sort of local people to fight against local people, creating the beginnings of the militias. But because in 1999, when it was the worst part of the violence by the militias, of course, Prabowo was already not there. He was already banned from the military. So in that way, he was safe from that process. But I guess what I would like to say here is that the vetting, the fact that we have this amnesia, we're not interested in learning officially about what happened and taking steps to stop it, and ensuring that people who are have this record of human rights violations cannot enter into politics, cannot have public position. That is really, I think, the deep core issue that we have to deal with. And, you know, don't forget that, for example, Jokowi, he appointed Wiranto as his coordinating minister for political and legal and security affairs in 2016. Wiranto has an indictment written by the UN for crimes against humanity during 1999 that took place in East Timor. So this is the big picture of, you know, kind of our failure, and we need to take steps to continue to fight against this. The next slide. And Rosalia, please tell me if I don't need to say everything that I prepared in this slide. Maybe it's too much. So Indonesia tried to have a truth commission, a commission that would focus on the crimes and the violations that took place during the new order, but that was stopped. We have a very weak human rights court, but there has been 100% acquittals, basically. Some were convicted at the beginning of the Indonesian Reformation, but everybody then was freed on appeal. Under Jokowi, so this is also issues around Mahfud and others, Jokowi pushed for a non-judicial inquiry, but it became this rush process focusing on 12 cases where at the end there is a report that is not open to the public. It's a report about supposedly about human rights violations in cases ranging from 1965 to Papua to all these cases that haven't been brought to the Human Rights Court, but there's no perpetrators that are mentioned in the report. And in the last few months of this Jokowi's regime, Mahfud pushed for providing existing services to victims. So everything rushed, everything done really quickly and sort of brushed under the table. Next slide. But there are some glimmers of hope. So I don't know if many of you probably haven't heard, but Aceh had a truth commission. And that Truth Commission put out a report in December 2023. It exists online and it was presented to the Aceh Parliament. They're now working on an English translation of the report. And I think it is an important report that shows, it's an official report. It was written by the Aceh Truth Commission and it was mandated under the local law. And the report actually talks about the systemic torture, disappearances, killings. It talks about the need for our security institutions to do reform and other recommendations. Sadly, it's done kind of, it was put out, but also kind of hidden because people are still very scared to speak out about these things. And in the same month, a few days later, there was an attack of the Rohingya refugees in Aceh. There's about 1,600 refugees that have come from Bangladesh and are stranded in Aceh. And with the use of, because it's very much part of this kind of social media rumor mongering that was taking place, and students associated with the Gerinda party then attacked some of the refugees who were in Banda Aceh. So it was very much a kind of a nationalistic, xenophobic move. And it was also a push against Mahfud, who was obviously the minister who was in charge of dealing with this Rohingya refugee situation. Maybe I'll leave it at that because I feel like I've already spoken too much, and then we'll just open it up for discussion.
Okay, sorry for the microphone. I left it the other side. But I think now we have already a first round of presentation, which already gives some ideas of situation that we are confronting. I want to make sure we all know that there are three candidates, right? Number one is Anis, who is the one that Kharisma has talked about in terms of having used identity politics during the government race for Jakarta. That is a very famous case on that Ahok, the governor at the time, a Chinese Christian, was accused of blasphemy and ended up 2 years in jail, and that caused him to lose, basically. That was at the time against Prabowo and Anis, who mobilized Islamic group, who now are very quiet at the moment during this current election. But we cannot forget that. Now then we have Prabowo. I think we don't need to say too much about him since it's very clear what has been said. But the important thing is he's now the vice presidential candidate, as was said at the beginning, is the son of Jokowi. And Jokowi was the opponent of Prabowo for 2 elections, where Prabowo lost both time, but now is supporting Prabowo, has left his party, basically, has left the support of the candidate, the number 3, which is Ganjar Pranowo. So has betrayed a lot of people, including his own supporter, to move to Prabowo. First, he tried to extend his term for 3 terms. He didn't manage. There was opposition from his own party and other factors. And then he's still trying to keep his power through his son. This is the general. And his son doesn't seem too capable. That is at least the impression, I would say, of 90% of the people. But he's the son of Jokowi. And that has a great influence. But it's not only Jokowi. There has been a lot of giving of social assistance in the last, so the budget for social assistance of Indonesia this year is higher than during COVID. So you can imagine it's extremely high, and it has been distributed by the president himself. So the president is campaigning basically for one candidate. So there are many issues that are influencing the election. So it's not simply the support of Jokowi. It's the support of Jokowi using state resources. So we need to be very clear about that. And there is a very good documentary about this, which has just come out 2 days ago, 30 Votes. Unfortunately, it's in Indonesia. It's a 2-hour documentary by 3 experts through 3 law experts, which really set up how this massive fraud was organizing already more than 1 year ago. It's not a sudden decision. It's very worth seeing for those that speak Indonesian. So this is 30 Votes. That is the context. But let's go now, please. If you have any questions, ask and comments. First, I will take question first, and then I will give an opportunity to comment.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask you, I was thinking about like my context where I come from, which is Colombia, and thinking about like how we have managed to go through the war period through a transitional justice framework and actually in memory through museums and so on. So my question was, what are the attempts from the Indonesian government, or not now or in the past, to try to build memory and repair victims of the genocide of the 65?
Okay, thank you. And any other comments? Okay, Gabriel. Gabriel is also Indonesian expert. So please, there are a number of Indonesian experts.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Very broad, actually. You talked, Mr. What's your name? Sorry. Kharisma, about the persistence of oligarchies. Could you picture those oligarchies very briefly, and to tell us also what is the weight of military officers in these networks? Thank you.
Okay, third question. Any other? No? Okay, then please, who wants Kharisma first?
Terima kasih. Yeah, I think the documentations about Indonesian oligarch is quite well documented, especially by Jeffrey Winters. But you know how oligarchy in Indonesia transformed, right? From the in Indonesia during the New Order, we call it ABG. ABRI is the military, B is bureaucrat, G is Golkar party, right? And then in the let me give you a simple example. So Suharto, they knows where strategic business like oil and gas tax, Suharto put their own groups basically to control this strategic, or they call it vital institution. So tax, oil and gas, mineral, everything. So this group, they even established their own think tank. So transform themselves from authoritarian forms into civilized institution. They have think tank, they have NGO, they have business, they have everything. So when reformations trying to, we call it reformation because it was not revolution, right? So in 1998 that mentions, what happened is more procedural changes, but the oligarchs still control these vital units. So for example, in the 2000s, when all the states, Indonesia in the brink of bankruptcy, economic bankruptcy, and then we established a BPPN as an institution to curate the state assets, this institution still controlled by this oligarch. So that's why all the oligarch in Indonesia until now still persist. One of the oligarch that still survive until now is Yusuf Kala and Surya Paloh. Of course, the other Luhut is also part of the group. So what I can say is this oligarch, they operate in the different candidates. It's just like a game. You put your bet in the different. So why I can say that anybody who wins, there will be no significant shock, no dramatic changes, because this oligarch, they put their bets. So very clear in the report Bu Lia shared to me the network of this oligarch. So and also including in the mineral. So I guess that one of the challenge to Jokowi is about Jokowi's control to the mineral, critical mineral, and then the other oligarch become marginalized. So this kind of conversation as well. So I don't want to be like only localized in a certain topics. My task is trying to say that what is the other hidden war? What is the other hidden contestation? It's not only about ideology or democracy, but it's also about economy.
Yeah, Galuh.
Thank you. So around the genocide of 1965, actually, in 1998, when, at the time when Reformation was the strongest, the upper house of the parliament did promise, made a resolution that there would be a truth and just based process for finding a way out of our conflict. And also they made another resolution on a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. However, a law was passed in 2004 to create this Truth Commission, but it was then canceled by the Constitutional Court. And the Constitutional Court, it was a case brought in by some of the activists, and it was because in the law it said that people can get reparations if they forgave their perpetrators. And that was the article that was challenged in the Constitutional Court. And the Constitutional Court said, oh, we agree with that. So but when we change that article, then we're going to also cancel the whole law. So it was, in a way, we won the battle, but lost the war, because then they canceled the Truth Commission, and there hasn't been one since then, except for the one that I mentioned before, the non-judicial inquiry that Jokowi set up last year, which has been very, very rushed and not serious at all, doesn't even mention perpetrators, as I mentioned. I think part of the weakness of our transitional justice process, and it supports what Kharisma is saying, is that, one of the products, there were a few products of reformation, and one of the most important ones was the Anti-Corruption Commission. However, the Anti-Corruption Commission had the mandate only to look it was not retrospective. It was only looking towards kind of the new corruption, but it never actually looked at the corruption that happened under Suharto and all its cronies. So that money, there are some cases where, you know, Tommy Suharto's money is somewhere and, you know, but in a very small percentage, it's never been recovered. So in a way, it has allowed people like Prabowo, Wiranto, all of these, the Suharto children, to keep the what they got from the new order and then repurpose it, you know, set up a political party, change their clothes out of their military costumes and join this so-called, you know, procedural democracy, if I use the word that Kharisma was saying. And therefore, because they're not vetted and their money, their riches, their spoils of looting Indonesia's natural resources and what should be the right of all the people of Indonesia, then they are back in central, you know, center stage. And with social media, able to, you know, stop discussions on very serious issues like abduction of people and torture and killing with a funny TikTok of somebody not being able to dance, you know, and it's really sad. In the beginning of our discussion, I said, you know, I feel like personally really depressed right now where we are. And, you know, I think we need to look at what we, you know, the roads that we didn't take, the wrong turns we took it. And one of them is happening globally with, you know, social media allowing lies and being not accountable, and, you know, these global tech companies being allowed to destroy democracies all over the world. So Indonesia is not alone, but sadly, you know, it, as an Indonesian, of course, it affects me very much and all of you as well, and the region as well.
I don't have answers to your specific questions, but I would just note that this backsliding in the democratic process, the rising authoritarianism, has been gradual through the years of Jokowi, especially in his second term. It's not just something that has appeared with this campaign, and it is also part of a global trend. I'm not sure where the backsliding is worse. I would guess in my country rather than in Indonesia. At this point, I guess we'll see from our election that's coming up this year whether our would-be autocrat becomes president again. I would suggest also that that the elites who maintain power during the Suharto era, or their successors, have maintained a role in government throughout. The generals, as you say, took off their uniforms, and they've been figures in every administration since elections, free and fair elections began. Wiranto is a good example, as you mentioned. Luhut Panjaitan, the president's chief of staff, the former general. There are a number of former generals holding key positions. And Jokowi is unusual, I think, because he came in as the first leader of the country who was not connected to the elites. I mean, leaving aside the revolutionary leaders. Megawati was the president who was the daughter of Sukarno. SPY, Yudhoyono was the general himself. So maybe expectations are a little bit different for Jokowi, that as a businessman, he would come in and, you know, he was cast by some Western media as a reformer, as an Obama figure, which I think was incorrect. And he proved that incorrect. So I think maybe expectations were a little bit different, that Jokowi would leave a different legacy, but instead he encouraged his children into politics, and he set up a dynasty and created a mechanism where he can have great influence now if Prabowo were to win. I was thinking on my way over here, really, how will the dynamics work if Prabowo is president and Jokowi's son is vice president? Who will really be making decisions and leading this government? It will be interesting to see a contest. Maybe they'll be rivals again, as they were in the last two elections, and we may have a power struggle behind the scenes. But maybe we should have some more questions.
I will make some comment, I take the prerogative of the chair and then open the floor again. I think one important factor, like was said, the backsliding didn't start now. One significant fact was that Prabowo, the opponent of Jokowi, was made Minister of Defense in the second term of Jokowi. So you can imagine the president opponent, the one who was fighting, didn't accept the result. People died because of that. And yet he was made the Minister of Defense, which is one of the best portfolio that you can have in Indonesia. And the Vice President was made Minister of Tourism. So both the opposition was basically englobated into the government. So there was no opposition. And this is one of the reasons Jokowi is so popular. There was no one to criticize. Basically, all the parties were part of the cabinet, and they would do so. All the law could pass very easily, and that we should not forget. So many people thought, oh, Indonesia is a great democracy. And to my student, there are some here, but I would say, no, it's a pseudo-democracy. There is no opposition at the moment in parliament. The second term has been very different from the first term of Jokowi. Although now many people are disappointed of what is happening. Actually, it started already with the second term of Jokowi, and we need to see within that context. Okay, now I open again the floor. Oh, one more comment, sorry, about the generals, because it's very interesting. Some of these generals were enemies of Prabowo. You have the case of Susilo Bambang. You have I mean, they were the one that judged Prabowo and kicked him out of the military at the time. And now they are supporting Prabowo. So there are a lot of very interesting dynamics in this election. Okay, Pak Teddy, silakan.
Terima kasih. My sort of question, but I would like to go back to Jokowi's before the Constitutional Court affair. In October, he has the approval rating very high, like 82 or 83%. Maybe they said the highest in the world or something. But then after October, things seems to change because of the social media. And recently, the most significant is the petition started by universities, especially started by Jokowi's own university, the University of Gajah Mada in Yogyakarta, and followed by other universities. I heard there are already 130 universities all over Indonesia issuing statements against Jokowi's way of doing things. I think this makes Jokowi worried too. The proof is that it is said that Jokowi quietly approached the Sultan of Yogyakarta, telling him that he wants to meet Megawati. I'm sure you have heard all of this. So my question here, do you think Jokowi's approval has gone down and it will has an impact on tomorrow's election? Thank you.
Question? Okay.
I'm pretty new to this whole topic, so I have more of a general question. So when we talked about the election, we only talked about men running for office and being backed by other men. So I was wondering, how are women represented in the Indonesian democracy, and also maybe what effects can this election have on women's rights, or more on the overall issue of gender equality or inequality?
Okay, last question I give to the new one. Okay.
Hello, thank you very much. Terima kasih ya. I have a question about, first of all, I'm from Thailand. And also I've been following the election in Indonesia as well. Also see the hello, okay. So I've seen kind of like the recent rise of extremists in Indonesian politics for the past 5 years, how it affects the rights of minority. So the question that I would like to ask the panelists is, how does the rise of extremists will impact on the election result, also the rise of minority groups in Indonesia as well? Terima kasih.
Okay, this time we start with Galuh. Pick your questions.
Okay. I'm not going to answer the Jokowi popularity because he's definitely not popular on my books. But I would imagine that, you know, a lot of people, myself included, 2014, we were all, you know, we were very optimistic, but it just, you know, capsized the whole thing. So especially the behavior in the last, for this election with the Constitutional Court, etc. So I'm sure it has affected his popularity. In terms of women, Indonesia has a quota system for parliamentarian candidates, but if you look at who actually ends up running in parliament, you know, it's a lot of, the women are a lot of celebrities or wives of public officials. To run as a parliament, to run for office, you need a lot of money, you need name recognition. So it's, it hasn't really, we could do better in terms of the quality of the people who can sit in parliament. But so there are women running in the, because this election is not only, it's not only the presidential elections, but it's all sorts of, all levels of people getting elected. And of course, you know, we, in terms of laws, constitution, there's supposed to be gender equality, but we have a lot of discrimination, particularly in the local laws. There's issues around mandatory wearing of a hijab, particularly in local level regulations. And we have a new criminal code, or a revised criminal code, which has a lot of discrimination. And, you know, I think now abortion has been criminalized, and people who are living together unmarried, particularly people from the LGBTQ communities, are very much at risk of being discriminated. So Indonesia, I mean, we have improved a lot since Reformasi, but the promise of Reformasi was much higher. We had so much more dreams, and, you know, we're comparatively, you know, we have Myanmar happening in the region. We have all sorts of crises. So we're doing okay, but we should have been doing better.
It's a very powerful woman, though, who is the head of the PDP, one of the three party, and the former president of Indonesia, who was a woman. But she's not necessarily gender oriented, but she is clearly a strong woman and with a lot of influence. So now we go, please.
I was just going to offer a comment and answer your question about women. Jokowi has appointed women to some prominent positions, and they stand out perhaps more than in earlier times. Retno, the foreign minister, is one example. But Megawati is the big exception to this trend towards women not having a role in politics, because as a former president and head of PDIP, as Lee was saying, she basically well, she was a major figure behind the scenes and sometimes prominently in all 10 years of Jokowi's presidency. And there was only a split recently when she wanted to support Ganjar, and Jokowi broke with her on this and went with Prabowo. So she's still playing a prominent role as Ganjar's supporter, but it seems like she's going to lose out this time.
In the last elections, minorities and women gave more votes to Jokowi. So at the national level, the idea of diversity and unity, that inclusive, not conservative, it's still, and I believe also in this election this year, it's still more attractive rather than idea of fundamentalism or conservatism. So at the subnational level, it's different. At the subnational level, if your campaign is Islam nationalistic or anti-minority, etc., you can win. But at the national level, it's very difficult. So that's why even Prabowo was in the previous election used this against women, conservatisms. He failed. So now Prabowo not really talk about this. And Anies, number one, we have three, right? Anies number one. He's associated with the fundamentalist group because the party that support his candidacy is come from a fundamentalist group. So I believe if Prabowo learned from the previous contestation, if he label Anies with fundamentalism, not inclusive, Prabowo can win. That's because like a more pro-woman, more pro-diversity in Indonesia, etc. About the popularity, the survey after the Constitutional Court scandal and even until last week, Jokowi popularity still above 75%. So I like the term used by A.F. Saifullah Fatah, naked nepotism. The key term is naked, but nepotism is new in Indonesia. If you ask people in Indonesia, the head of sub-district, the husband, and then after 2 terms, changed to his wife, that's people accept it. So when Jokowi did it, it's really a scandal. It's really a shame for scholars, for us who fight for democracy. But for majority of Indonesian in the survey, it's not. So the term naked nepotism or naked corruption. Corruption is new in Indonesia? No. But Bulia, good point. Normalizations of naked corruption, that's dangerous. Not. Last point is I would like to make here's my wife, his brother kidnapped by the soldier. So his brother in the same class with Budiman Sujatmiko and others student in Gajah Mada. Until now, he's not functioning as a human being. He still use sometimes short and then he traumatized the whole life until now. So basically he lost his friend. So you said that how can we forget this? I cannot forget this. It's a really step. But for the other people, saying like when our reasons for becoming Indonesia, which is we are diverse, different religion, different ethnic group, is also under attack. When some groups say that, oh, because 88% Indonesia are Muslim, then Islam should be the main regulations of our country. This is also a threat to democracy, in my opinion. When Mahfud, for example, become the spokespersons of somebody who steal the money during the transition, economic transition in 2000, and ask Sri Mulyani, please pay this guy certain billion rupiah. That's also attack to democracy in terms of equity of economic. So my last point is the nominations of the president candidate is very corrupted, it's very elite. So just like in other country, our option is just selecting the less evil. Right? So for other people, evil is attack to naked democracy, like what Prabowo said. For some people, Anies behavior, attacking diversity, is also attack to democracy. For other people, Mahfud ignorance of this economic crime is also attack to democracy. So what happened now, but I think people choices trying to have their own preference with which much more relevant to their situation. That's why it explained Gen Z, they forget about Prabowo events, right? Some other people, some minority group, they really worry with Anies. So I hate to say that Indonesian differs their leaders, but it's very difficult decision. But I believe Indonesian is, so the topic is hopes. The hopes that I can say is, yes, we have three evils that we have to select. We have our own criteria, which one that less evil. But the fact that now civil society is like getting their own under awareness, and I can say anything about the candidate, about Jokowi, and I can still come back to Indonesia fine. The petition of 120 university, some of them get tried, yes, but they will not get blasphemy go to the court. They're still safe. I think this is something that we can keep, we can preserve, so that check and balance. So I agree with your point, Bulia. Check and balance is the key for whoever will elect it.
Yeah, this was a discussion before this this meeting among us, the speaker who were already here. But I want to give credit to civil society. I don't think we have really stressed that Sciortino was fall out because of civil society, students movement, etc., which led then also people on the top to change their position. So it was not a revolution, but it was pushed by people power. And also I think Habibie and Gus Dur did bring some very significant changes. So I don't want to be too negative. I understand Kharisma point that there is a continuity in some of the bad practice, but people have tried and tried and tried to limit some, and there have been effort to do it. But Gus Dur, of course, was kicked out of government for trying to change, but it did put the military out of parliament. It did recognize Chinese minority, which before were not recognized, and many other things that would have been unthinkable before. So civil society has played a very important role. And now we are seeing again, you would be very surprised about how many actions there are at the moment, in spite of the uphill battle. I mean, we have the university was mentioned, but people are also going backwards. They have a manifestation in the night going backward to show that this is backsliding of democracy. The film, this film that has been produced has been downloaded by more than 5 million, 6 million people within 2 days. It's been just released. So I think in Indonesia they say muak, disgusting. I think goes beyond the intellectual people. There have been artists who are taking serious risk. They have written to Jokowi. They were very heavily support of Jokowi, like Butet Kartareja or Gunawan Mawabed. These were like the most loyal supporter of Jokowi, but they have taken position very early on, giving signal to him that he was going the wrong way. This was even before the Constitutional Court decision. So I think civil society is trying, but again, the contest may not be as favorable to their action. But very important to stress that they are there and fighting. It's not like everyone is accepting what is going on. Again, I open for a last round. If there is any other question, first Ben and then Gabriele, and then you and you and you. 5. Okay.
Okay, I'll make it quick then. My question is just about what do you think the implications of the election on regional politics are going to be? And as Leah raised in her introduction, it is a very important and meaningful country within the region and within ASEAN specifically. there's a bit of a mixed track record, I think. I mean, sometimes Indonesia has raised important human rights issues, and sometimes, I mean, for example, its chairmanship of ASEAN last year, sort of a mixed record, some achievements, some areas where they didn't make much progress, like Myanmar. So just wanted to hear your thoughts on implications for regional politics. Thanks.
Okay, Gabriel.
Yes, what do we know about the capacity of Prabowo and Gibran in case of success to gain a majority?
Okay, who was here? Okay, you were there. And then in the back, right?
But I just Indonesia's role within Southeast Asia, how that will shift with tomorrow's election, and if Prabowo is how that will change.
Well, my question was actually more related to LGBTQI rights. Because as you were talking before, like in the rise of right-wing populisms in the Western world in the last 2 years, we saw that actually LGBTQI plus rights were weaponized from these right populists, like I can say about the Argentinian case, the Brazilian case, the Colombian case, and the United States case. In Germany happened the same with the right-wing parties with AfD, and in the Netherlands too. So the question is like, how is in the case of Indonesia? Have these the LGBTQI population has been more stigmatized than it is normally, and they're also being weaponized during the election, or how is that going?
Hello. Well, basically, I'm Indonesian, so when all of you mentioned about what happened and yeah, many things about the candidate, I feel, oh my God, finally I heard something like that, because that's really true. But unfortunately, my people is really forgot, like they forgive easily and they forget easily. But I never forget and I never forgive anyone in Indonesia. Well, basically, my question is related to the academic freedom. So we know about that dirty vote that just released 2 days ago, and today, I forgot, is it today or yesterday? Well, basically the law experts that become the speakers are being criminalized by one of the presidential candidate. Do you see these things as something that we need to be aware of? I mean, like, this is like ancaman, what is ancaman? Yeah, something like that for academic freedom in future, because it can be a sign that maybe even before they become a president, they criminalize an expert that that telling something about the facts. So it can be, yeah, who knows that in the future, we who affiliated in university cannot speak and we cannot criticize the government anymore in academic area.
I seem to remember that Jokowi had signed off 10 big projects with China in the Belt and Road Initiative, and it was well known for this too, to invite all this big infrastructure. So first was this successful in terms of efficiency? I mean, in this infrastructure project, what is it about? And the second question is the next government, the free tickets, what would be the stand on this? Because we saw some shift in the Philippines, for example, after because now it's Prabowo and Gibran is interesting because the son of Jokowi would probably want to continue that, but then the military old school might want to have another stance on this. So can they be united on how to deal with China economics in the country?
Comments.
Let me take a stab at a couple of those questions. As far as what we might expect from the election results, so Prabowo's goal is to win in the first round and avoid a runoff in June. The other two candidates are hoping to hold him back from that and be the one who gets into a runoff with him. In the past, this is actually his fifth try to be president, and twice he was the nominee in the final round. And in those elections, he didn't really get past the mid-40s. the polls are showing him over 50%, but from the polls I've seen, it's within the margin of error, meaning it could go either way. So it's going to be something of a nail biter tomorrow, I think, for a lot of people waiting to see if the trend is continuing and he's exceeded 50% or not. If he can't win in the first round, I think he should be nervous about winning in a second round, because there'll be much more focus on him as the obvious front runner, and maybe others will unite behind one of the whoever is a second place finisher. But that's just speculation at this point. It's hard to know. And in terms of ASEAN, I have to say, having observed them over the years, I don't really ever expect much from them in terms of regional influence. To Indonesia's credit, it did make a stab at bringing some sense to the regime in Myanmar, and it did try to, pose a peace plan. It wasn't successful, and they underestimated the regime's willingness to cooperate. But other than that, I haven't really seen anything come out of ASEAN that is, that really affects all the other countries. It's kind of a live and let live. They all have human rights abuses, so who's going to go after another country for human rights abuses? They all have their issues. Now, China is the overriding issue geopolitically for the region. I wouldn't really expect a significant change in direction from Prabowo. I think even though he was not allowed into the United States for many years because of his record of human rights abuse, he does have some ties with the United States, and he has visited there since. And there are military relations between, his Defense Department and the Americans. So I think that and he's spoken about continuing to pursue the non-alignment of Indonesia. So I think we'll kind of see the same thing playing off both the United States and China, trying to get aid from China while not going too far in the direction of supporting China. That's what I would expect. For the other questions, maybe I'll turn that over to you, both of you.
Galuh?
Okay. So just a few of those. The question on whether the LGBTQI community was weaponized, I think definitely with local politics that comes up all the time, where politicians try to gain votes by saying that, oh, our area, our region is anti-LGBTQI. So that I think has come up quite a bit. In terms of the national presidential elections, I'm not aware too much about that. Maybe maybe Kharisma or Leah has some more information about that, but I know that Human Rights Watch made a survey and asked the teams from the 3 candidates to write their position on human rights, and LGBT rights was one of them. I think in the Prabowo's team didn't answer any of the questions, so that you can go to the Human Rights Watch website, and it's only the 2 candidates that actually answered, and they just skipped that question. So obviously it's something that is a big taboo issue in terms of these elections. Around our freedom of expression, yeah, I think under Jokowi there has been a shrinking space. I don't know if you're aware that some of the 2 of very prominent human rights activists, Fathia and Haris Azhar, were brought to court because Indonesia has we can criminalize defamation, and they were brought to court by Luhut using our very flexible internet law, and for talking about a research paper that implicated Luhut having conflict of interest because he's the Minister of maritime affairs and investment, but he also owns or has linked to a mine in Papua. So there was a research paper written by a number of research organizations and environmental organizations. Fatia and Haris did a talk show on YouTube, and then they were brought to court. It was a very long trial, and in January, they were acquitted. So I was there at the court, and we all thought it was looking bad. There was so many police there, and it was very tense, but against our expectations, including the expectations of Fatia and Haris, they were acquitted. And the judge, we could see the judge like sort of trembling, reading his judgment. So, sometimes people stand up, and that's, if we're talking about a flicker of hope, that's a flicker of hope. But unfortunately, yeah, the fact that defamation is not it should be just like a civil case instead of a criminalization, and that can be used to make people be afraid of speaking out. So over to you, Mas.
Kharisma.
There was a survey in October last year, Hans Andlov Madani survey by Pusat Paramadina, National List Representative, asked questions. Do you agree if the state, very authoritarian, ban discussion on this topic, LGBT, about the most loudspeaker? In Indonesia, it's one of, you stay in a hotel and then 4 a.m. loudspeaker. Public say, okay, give the authorizations to the state to ban this freedom of expression, right? So when people complain about the most loudspeaker, you can be a problem. So to me, attack to freedom of expression, it's more dangerous if it comes from the society itself. When you organize a seminar on LGBT and then the Islamic Front defenders just raid your room, who are there? I mean, the government sometimes also doing stupid things, but sometimes the government, the government is, if something bad from the government, but if the attack from the civil society, I'm more worried about that. So the case of Luhut, and our colleagues, I think it's a good case where a good underbreaker that finally they acquitted. But the case where this uncivil society attack other group and no solution, right? Nobody brought to the court because of attack the other groups have a gathering. I think it's really dangerous. The second thing, a question about how if Prabowo wins, able to mobilize the parliaments. I don't believe in the DPR, in our parliaments oppositions. They are all opportunistic. Everybody win, and then everybody, of course, in the first 2-3 months, they will very loud, but they just want to get votes. And I blame Muhammadiyah and NU not take position as a constant oppositions. They always get the cake of power, whoever become the president, right? So I agree with Bulia that we rely on civil society for our vibrant but not religious organizations. They always close to the power. So I still believe non-religious civil society, it's more diverse issue rather than that.
Well, I think there are so many other aspects, like we know, like Christian support whom, Catholic, Protestant support this, Catholic support other candidates. There are many nuances in this election and previous election. But I would worry very much. We have seen an increase of case about freedom of expression. The last about the movie, this movie I mentioned, Dirty Votes, immediately the director, the three experts have been brought to court. Yeah, they are being brought to court by Prabowo and company. So it is going to be used for everything that is considered against the government. Now there is, like, to conclusion, there are two options. One option is indeed the first round finish, but it's not only the vote. I think there is misunderstanding about this. It's not only the 50%. They have to win in 20 provinces, and they have to have 20% of vote minimum. Indonesia has 37, how many provinces now? Because they change all the time. So just to check how many provinces. 37.
38.
38. So they need to have, because they change, they split again, politics play a role. Like Papua had 2, now there are 6. Who knows why, right? And there is another problem. Many of these governor and district head has been appointed by Jokowi in the last year. More than 80 people have been appointed by the president. So we have quite a preparation for this clue during the election. But the point is, you need to win in 20 provinces and at the least 20% of the vote, plus more than 50%. So that is what we need to understand to see whether indeed he will be able or not to pass the first round. Now the survey, they tell us something, but not everything. Yeah? Because survey have been used in Indonesia to make sure that later on you can protest. You see, during the survey, I was #1. Now, how come I lost? So that is, again, one word of caution about this. But again, the one with Prabowo are hoping in 1/3, the other one are hoping in the second turn, which will give more opportunity. It's not going to be easy, because the other two candidates are not necessarily on the same track, but still at the moment, they are united in terms of saying choose one or choose three, but don't choose #2. Now, whether this is going to happen, we will know tomorrow evening, maximum, I think. #4, yeah, this is the
Salam 4 jari.
Yeah, so 4 is the new sign of saying not 3, but 1, not 2, but 1 or 3, so 4. So this is, again, one movement. You can have your preference in terms of the more Islamic, although he has not played the Islamic card this time. He has been very smart, and he has played the card of opposition to Jokowi. And this has gained him a lot of support. He has been very strong in the opposition to Jokowi, more than the other candidates. Whether that will allow him to become #2, we don't know. Again, it's a mystery for tomorrow. So we have to wait until tomorrow, maximum the 15th. Normally it's very quick, the count. Yeah, well, we are hoping for the best, right, Galuh? Miracles can happen. So with this, thank you very much for everyone. Applause to the speakers. And please, we have some Indonesian food on that side. Yeah, well, but first give your donations before going to the food, because as you know, we don't charge for the events, but we opt in contribution so that we can continue to support this kind of activity. Thanks again to all the speakers. Another applause. Thank you, Galuh. Unfortunately,
Thank you.
well,
Bye-bye.
of
Talk to you
Indonesian food
tomorrow.
over there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.